Good afternoon and welcome to the Federal Executive Forum celebrating 18 years of profiling excellence in government IT mission programs. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss critical issues facing government and industry leaders with their cybersecurity strategies and solutions. With me on today's show are Rear Admiral Bill Chase, Deputy Commander, Joint Force Headquarters, Department of Defense Information Network; Ron Pontius, Deputy to the Commanding General, U.S. Army Cyber Command; Robert Costello, Chief Information Officer at CISA; Lamont Copeland, Managing Director of Federal Solutions Architect, Verizon; Felipe Fernandez, Senior Director, Systems Engineering, Fortinet Federal; and Sterling Wilson, National Alliance Director at Rubrik. We're talking cybersecurity, and we're going to start with Admiral Chase. Tell us about the state of the state. Well, give us 30 seconds for those that might not know. What is DOTN, as it's commonly referred to? And then give us a state of the state about what's happening across that program these days.
Sure. Joint Force Headquarters DOTN is a component underneath the U.S. Cyber Command. Our primary mission areas are to secure, operate, and defend DoD networks globally. And as we look at cybersecurity within that and the secure and operate portion of this, our first priority is to enable missions across all of DoD. First and foremost, the cyber one, over which much of the department's command and control runs, as well as that of all the other mission partners that we have throughout the Department of Defense. So as we say cybersecurity, we're looking primarily to tame complexity and scale across the entire department, making sure we understand not compliance rather, but risk, and something we have to manage every day, because it's sad to say that DoD networks are not perfect on a daily basis, but it's something we can always aspire to make better and therefore assure missions, add resiliency to our spaces, and make sure that we can help others bring their mission to fruition. So as we look across that, we're trying to look at the department's risk from a defense in depth perspective. First and foremost among those is, what are the internet facing pieces? So in order to do that, we use a tool called Expanse under Palo Alto right now to do internet operations, where we can see what adversaries might see. And we look at this daily to make sure that we are continuing to sharpen our own sword, making sure that we reduce the risk to the least possible level on that, first and foremost, and then we work back inwards based on the priority of mission. So throughout today, I'll talk about that sort of risk profile. And by that, I mean, we look at the vulnerabilities times the threats times likelihood of this, and then the impact to the mission that they might affect.
Yeah, I think we've all learned that a lot of managing this cyber situation is managing risk and calculating risk. Ron, I see U.S. Cyber Command in the title there. Maybe a little bit of an explanation as to how U.S. Cyber Command fits in, maybe the relationship to DOTN, and then give us a state of the state about what's happening in your ecosystem.
So U.S. Army Cyber Command is an Army 3-star level command in the Army, and we're also an Army service component to United States Cyber Command, like Admiral Chase talked about. Mm-hmm. So we're the Army service component. So we really have both the Secretary of the Army, Chief of Staff of the Army for supporting the Army, and then as part of the overall Department of Defense, because as Bill talked about, the DOTN is inherently joint, so we take guidance and direction from U.S. Cyber Command to operate and defend the Army's networks and data and systems as part of that overall joint DOTN that is the DoD. So Army Cyber Command, we're a worldwide command, about 16,000 soldiers and civilians, as we, as I said, operate and defend the Army's networks, data, and systems. Additionally, we have our part of the Cyber Mission Force, which conducts cyberspace operations against our adversaries and deny them as they try to attack our own weapon systems and our data.
A big environment, the Army being such a large element of the services. I don't think people can appreciate how large it is compared to some of the other services, with all due respect to all of them. Bob, you've been on a tear over there at CISA. I wanted to ask you to explain 15 seconds your role as the CIO at CISA versus the larger CISA sort of responsibilities, and then tell us state of state. What have you been up to over there?
Yeah, sure thing. So my role is mostly to concentrate internally to enable the mission operators to do their mission. So the national mission of the Cybersecurity Directorate, I provide a lot of the internal support and systems for them to operate successfully as they build their tools and protect the federal civilian executive branch and our role here at CISA. And we provide a lot of support to the Infrastructure Security Division, National Risk Management Center, and others. So we do a lot of that internal CIO kind of functions, and then also obviously very responsible to make sure that CISA is following its own guidance and protecting our systems internally and externally as well. So we kind of share that mission with the Cybersecurity Directorate. Over here, I've been here a little over a year now, maybe a year and 4 months or so. So still a relatively new agency. So we're going through some of those formative steps that maybe other parts of DHS finished around the year 2008 or so, when you and I were over at ICE when we were about 5 years old. So right now we're doing some systems consolidation, seeing duplicative systems, consolidating some internal functions under the CIO to make sure that we're operating effectively. And then we are building some of the what I would call like kind of the base technology stacks that people can operate in. So we're starting to really expand our transport network, really expand some of our operating environments for people to deploy code in. And then I'm building up a lot of my DevSecOps staff and others to kind of provide increased services as CISA continues to build and operate as a component of DHS rather than an element of headquarters. So, we're building out a lot of those systems that the other components have maybe addressed over the last 15 years, everything from, human capital to just, basic staff level functions, correspondence systems and things like that.
Yeah, basic blocking and tackling to run an operating component. And while you're doing that, an incredible amount of responsibility and funding being sent your way to grow that organization.
Absolutely.
All right, Lamont, Verizon, you all are all over this ecosystem in the private sector, in the public sector. 5G, well known out there now. It's basically a staple. A lot of other technologies out there, but how do you secure it all? Tell us about the state of state and where you stand as far as ensuring that we have a bolstered environment.
Yeah, thanks, Luke, and great to talk with you guys all again. My role here is to really provide 5G and edge computing services to the government to help push these technologies, this fourth industrial revolution, to ensure that each one of the government agencies can be able to realize all these technology advances that are coming into play to be able to support the mission that they all have today. But as a responsible partner to all the federal government, we have to make sure that all these things are secure and they're ensuring that they're, the technology, the software, all the hardware, all these devices are providing all the services that they need, but in a secure manner. So what we're doing and looking at is, we're building inherent security inside of the network to ensure that the technology itself, the communications paths, all those things that are delivering out the connectivity pieces to each one of those devices and the end users is protected. But on top of that, we're also layering on different zero trust architectures, other technologies to be able to support the security aspect. And then also looking at things from our supply chain, making sure that the supply chain is secure, that we have the right partners in place, that we're getting the right chipsets, right software to be able to deliver out these services. And then we're also making sure that we have all the right operational procedures and processes, and ensuring that we're delivering secure, reliable services out to each one of the end users. Because as you all know, the people here and the data are the critical infrastructure, the things that we need to protect. As long as we're making sure that data is protected and these endpoints that they're delivering that data to, we'll be sure that we're providing the right services to our federal partners.
Absolutely, and we certainly do appreciate that, Felipe. How about at Fortinet, a instrumental part of the ecosystem here? Give us the state of the state as to what's happening in regards to securing our environment.
Yeah, good to talk with you, Luke. Thanks for the time. As agencies continue to balance their efforts in infrastructure modernization, cloud adoption, operational resilience, we're focusing on helping them implement greater visibility, automated security capabilities such as vulnerability scanning and incident response across all the enclaves in their AOR. As we know, digital transformation continues to boost agency mission success, but it also comes along with some challenges. And at Fortinet, we're making sure agencies are aware of cybersecurity solutions that we have that may be of assistance in potentially mitigating those risks brought on by new technologies, new third-party providers, and definitely from the threat actors that are looking to exploit any gaps in their security.
A critical element of the ecosystem and ensuring that snaps in and again bolsters this environment. Sterling, Rubrik, well, not a newcomer to the ecosystem, that's for sure. Very instrumental in both the private and public sector, but a newcomer to the show. So why don't you give us 30 seconds on how does Rubrik fit into this, and then give us the state of the state.
The interesting times for sure. And thank you for having me here today. You know, what we're seeing, not only here at Rubrik, but in the industry in particular, are some new trends. Data itself is being used in new ways. You mentioned even earlier that Rubrik isn't a newcomer, but perhaps a little bit of a newcomer to this space. And that's really because the industry itself has shifted. You know, data is not in the same places. They're not in the same places as they used to be. Data is that new crown jewel. We used to, you know, in the past, when we had these trusted architectures, data was really just an endpoint. It was something that we used into the applications, and it really didn't matter much outside of those applications. But what we're seeing today is data is the new crown jewel itself. Metadata, the data about the data, is almost even more important as we use that data to solve things, traffic patterns, soldiers in theater, hospitals, cures for diseases. So because of this, it has become literally the crown jewel that we use. This whole new market has also opened up another trend that we're seeing. It's also opened up a whole new market for nation state actors, as well as ransomware threat gangs. So the fact that we used to apply zero trust to what we call the periphery, you know, your firewalls, your CASBs, your IDPs, we're now seeing a zero trust or a need to apply those facets of zero trust directly to the data itself. And this is a little bit new, simply because we have a new market. We have, you know, ransomware as a service. We have, you know, double extortions, all of these new ways to try to steal, exfiltrate, and in some ways sell our data. So obviously, this has offered up new ways that we use our data, new ways that we're actually implementing security around the data itself. And of course, it also opens up some really new alliances between some companies, and where we have to work and make sure that we provide the comprehensive solutions that we need today.
Good catch on those alliances. I think that's really key and an important element here. No one single solution can handle it all. Let's go to a specific example. Ron, I'm gonna reach out to you. You mentioned obviously your global, massive element, the service of the Army. 18,000 men and women in your environment alone. I can't imagine the hundreds of thousands of threat vectors that you're trying to deal with on a massive scale. Everything must be industrial strength. Give us an example of one thing that you'd like to highlight that you're pushing the agenda forward.
Yeah, Luke. So when I appreciate you appreciate the scope and scale of the Army, almost 1.4 million users worldwide. And so when you look at that, the attack surface is quite large as we do things. So the Army the Army has Secretary Christine Wormuth published the Army Digital Transformation Strategy. And that is really focused on, I'm going to hit some higher and then dive down to answer your specific question.
Sure.
It's got 3 overall objectives. One is modernization, which envisions a digitally enabled, data-driven Army propelled by digital transformation. The second is reform, which is really about making sure that every dollar, every resource, the people in the Army is the best value, and that the Army is very good stewards of the resources, And then number 3 is people and partnerships, because as mentioned by a couple other panelists, it's absolutely about the talent and the competition for talent. But when I come back to that modernization piece, if I think about some of the key lines of effort, accelerate cloud native adoption by unifying the Army's enterprise and tactical clouds, leverage data as a strategic asset to achieve interoperability and get to decision making, and then elevate the Army cybersecurity posture and really embracing those zero trust principles that are in line with the DoD zero trust architecture, which is really the overarching thing the Department of Defense is doing, and Admiral Chase made a reference to it. But when we think about specifically in the areas, a big accomplishment over this last year was the Army adoption of Microsoft Office 365. We call it Army 365, and it was born out of a pilot program called Enterprise IT as a Service that Microsoft built this environment, and they built it with absolutely zero trust principles from the ground up. And we've now over in 2022, we've adopted that Army-wide, we transitioned to it, and it is the largest Office 365 tenant in the Army, and it's the second largest one that Microsoft has in the world. So it's quite extensive. I use that as an example, and it has gone extremely well, the migration to it, and it is all of the capabilities, the productivity suites, the Microsoft Teams, how we really enable remote work and collaboration is really outstanding what we have with Army 365.
Ron, is that completed at this point?
It is on the unclassified network.
Okay.
And we will be in the coming next 12 to 24 months moving to the secret network to adopt a similar capability in the secret environment.
Right. And I would imagine it's over 1 million users, and that's not just domestically, worldwide. So that has to be extremely complex rollout in doing something like that. So hats off to you for the success of that. All right, we're going to take a short break and we're going to be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.